what some people are calling fake news, and the transmission of what some people call hate speech on the internet. My name is Richard Landau. I am a journalist. I've worked in print and radio and television. I've hosted and produced television for a number of years. And currently, I'm also an educator. I teach matters related to communication and journalism. Having said that, let me introduce to you our two guests, and then I'll briefly read their bios. First with us is Bimbo Oloyede. Welcome, Bimbo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Susan Ponting, welcome. I'm going to briefly tell you who these distinguished guests are. She was a pioneer member of NTA's network news team and thereafter became an independent radio and producer, presenter, moderator. She also established the Women's Optimum Development Foundation in 1999, and for 15 years, she partnered with the United Nations, various United Nations organizations and governmental organizations, including the Canadian government and the British Council, using her media platform to promote development initiatives across Nigeria, with particular focus on gender equality, something that's been very much with us, particularly recently. From 2002 to 2015, she was a consultant news anchor and trainer with Channels Television, headquartered in Lagos, Nigeria. And she was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award for Journalistic Excellence as an investigative journalist. For the last 25 years, Bimbo Oloyede has trained various professionals in elocution, please correct me, public speaking, and communication skills. She's returning to broadcasting in 2021 as an independent producer and presenter. Welcome, Bimbo.
Thank you very much.
Also, let me read to you Susan Ponting's biographical information. She began her journalism and reporting career with Shaw Cable 10, where she won 2 Canadian Cable Producers Awards. Susan moved to print media, working with Metroland Media, the Toronto Star, North of the City magazine, Canadian Jewish News, Media Edge, Huffington Post, and others. She returned to television as a reporter-producer on Listen Up, which is an investigative program. She was also a freelance reporter and writer with CBC Radio, Global Television Network, CTV's Canada AM, and the Canadian Press. After working in mainstream media, Susan went on to the Actors Union, where she further honed her skills in communications. Susan produced events like the Actor Award of Excellence to Kiefer Sutherland. Susan started her own business and began integrating her media and journalism experience into PR and corporate communications, representing qualified, independent experts, filmmakers, directors, musicians, actors, and producers. In August 2016, Susan returned to television once again to work with Lorna Dueck at Context Beyond the Headlines as a senior executive producer and showrunner, and something I will tell you that she didn't put in her bio. Susan is a gifted musician and singer and composer. So I thought I would mention that to you for starters.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm going to ask each of you accomplished journalists to start with an opening statement that speaks to our major issue. And Bimbo, I'll start with you. We're going to go in alphabetical order. So perhaps you could give us your opening thoughts for a few minutes about where we stand with regards to, like I said, fake news and with hate speech as journalists, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we're talking about civic versus citizen journalism, and we're dealing with fake and hate news in the digital age. So briefly, what I think I want to tell you about is what I think it is, what it does, why it matters, and what it achieves. So what it is, civic journalism embraces the traditional approach to journalism to promote the dissemination of information about specific community issues, particularly political and social, in a way that explores the significance of the issue, stimulates personal responsibility, and enhances democratic processes. So what it does is basic. It increases public awareness. It encourages responsible public engagement. It fuels positive action based on correct information. It creates partnership opportunities, and it enables the media and the public to enhance civic society. It also improves the telling of relevant stories. Now, you will notice some key words there, which exist, in my opinion, within civic journalism: responsible, positive, partnership, enhance, and relevant. So what does civic journalism establish? Catherine Graham, many years ago, and you may remember, or you may know that Catherine Graham was the publisher of the Washington Post in the 70s when the Watergate scandal broke out. She said that the power is to set the agenda. What we print and what we don't print matters a lot. Of course, I have to add, what we broadcast and what we don't broadcast matters a lot. And why does it matter? It matters because as journalists, we are professionals. We are all over the world. We are editors, we're talk show hosts, we're reporters, we're correspondents, we're news anchors, etc., etc. And it matters because we are gatekeepers. We are gatekeepers of information. And because of that, we have to be truthful and we have to be accurate. We should not manipulate public sentiment. We should make an effort to tell all sides of the story. And then we also need to exhibit fair coverage. Because civic journalism focuses on real issues. It does not, it chases substance and not shadows, which is quite a lot of the time what we find with citizen journalism. And what does it mirror? What does civic journalism mirror? I think there are three aspects of journalism that civic journalism mirrors. I would say investigative journalism, solutions journalism, and political journalism. And then finally, I think I'd like to just say one or two things about what civic journalism achieves. Erin Morganson said something very interesting. She said, "You may tell a tale that takes up residence in someone's soul, becomes their blood and self and purpose. That tale will move them and drive them, and who knows what they might do because of it, because of your words. That is your role, your gift." I think I'll leave it like that for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Bimbo. Well said. Susan, please make a statement.
That's a big responsibility there, Bimbo. And I can quote so many people over the years whose words have and do stick with me, everyone from Rumi to our Lord Jesus. So fascinating that citizen journalism emerged in my career about 20 years ago. And it wasn't looked upon as a positive thing. And after watching and trying to keep up with both sides, more like many sides to a story now, it has become a part of our job. And, you know, I wanted to give an example last week when we were going to speak, but we had a technical glitch. A pastor's wife had arrived in Alberta, Canada, and she had been taken away from the airport in a van. And of course, many citizen journalists were on scene, many media. I mean, the media outlet I work for can be called alt media, I guess, because we do Christian analysis on news and events. But this story wasn't picked up by major media here in Canada, but it was by not us, but it was by other alt-right media, and it turned out that it was just one big giant mistake. However, it was fascinating how quickly secret photos of where the woman's, the pastor's wife was taken emerged, but then it was being framed as a story that she was kind of kidnapped by the government and put in a holding cell. So being in this business for so long, I'm really skeptical about a lot of stories. You know, 25 years ago, I wrote a newspaper story, you know, about the Catholic Church being involved in something. And my editor wouldn't publish it. And I asked him why, and he said, because there's more Catholics in Canada than anywhere else. So now we're looking at religion, politics, collectivists, socialists, right, left. The difference in good journalism is not getting angry after hearing the other side, right? So whatever that may be, it's about weighing a lot of information and taking the time to get the story right and to pick out truths and to present them. And that's getting more and more difficult. So we're also getting away from, I find, I want to say alt journalism, from if it bleeds, it leads. It seems that there's nothing but 24/7 news cycle of everything that's wrong in the world. And that's what advertisers pay for on major media outlets. But it's become more of a fear cycle as opposed to a truth cycle. And working in sales for a while, it was also the old maxim was, present fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So I never felt comfortable with any of that. If it bleeds, it leads. And so it's why I do what I do now. And I return to religion news stories, multi-faith stories, and I still produce hard news, but with one exception. I show that God is moving beyond the headlines. And that is to be taken in any way that people call God. But at the same time, I really take concerted effort to hear more than one voice on all sides of the equation. And doing this is really difficult, but it's worth it, I feel, in the end. And civic journalism and stories from other sources and around the world now, it started out as a negative, and now if we don't have it, we won't get all aspects of the truth. So thank you for listening.
It strikes me that, and I'm going to ask both of you to respond to this, that where some of the bricks have come loose or where there's been a transformation in journalism has to do with the proliferation of social media, new media. I mean, citizen journalists really wouldn't have a tool if they didn't have the kind of medium we're using right now. How do you think things have changed? Bimbo, I mean, what impact do you think the electronic media that we're using now have had on news gathering and reporting?
Well, Richard, there's no doubt that everybody has access to information now. And in fact, you can almost say that anybody is a journalist, except that you and I know that that's not quite true. I think that the social media has given so many people an opportunity to get in on the act, as it were. And I think I agree with Susan that it is necessary to hear all sides of the story. But my problem with citizen journalism is that, there is a freedom that is almost too much, if it is possible to put it that way. There's a responsibility, you see, that goes with information that many people don't have. They don't have the training. They don't have the knowledge. And I agree that it is important for all news organizations, all news media, to be able to gather as much information as possible. But we have to be very, very careful that what we are collecting and what we're disseminating is actually as close to the truth as possible. Social media has been very, very misleading in many instances, but that is not to say that it does not have its advantages. It does, but I think we just have to be careful. Definitely, news has become much more entertaining since there has been, wide access to information through social media, and I don't take away from the fact that news is drama and drama is entertainment. But then, you know, I think we've got to be a bit more moderate than we are being at the moment.
News is drama. What a great statement. I may come back to that later. Susan.
Okay.
I agree with everything that Bimbo just said. And you know, without social media, we wouldn't know, for instance, Ola sent me some links to have a look at, and the British police, you know, during the G20 summit had, well, they killed a white guy walking from a magazine stand who was just leaving his job, and attacked him from behind. And had it not been for a really wealthy trader where it happened right across the street, it would have never been known. Then they killed a Black gentleman on an airplane who was going back to, they were sending this father of four back to Africa, and they killed him on the plane. And if it weren't for a man who called the papers to tell them that he witnessed it, both of these people, they witnessed it, and it wasn't what was being presented to the people. So if we don't hold big pharma, big oil, big government, big corporations, if we're not there to try to tell the truth and hold them to accountable, then I don't think we can do that just on our own. But as Bimbo said, journalists have to follow a very serious code of ethics and a very serious, I'm feeling a bit like a dinosaur as I work with up and coming, well, I am a dinosaur, up and coming journalists, because there's so many things that they understandably don't care about, but that were drilled into our heads when we were coming up. And that's all changing. And that's a shame. It's really got to, the younger generation really does have to learn from the older generation about the standards and procedures of telling a story.
Now, you mentioned standards and procedures. This is an interesting point because there are some citizen journalists who've managed to get themselves in a lot of trouble. One who stumbled onto a scene of a suicide in Japan and decided to present it and got in a whole lot of trouble. So when you talk about standards, like I know you learned this in school, the suicides, we don't glamorize them or glorify them, whatever, et cetera, and so forth. Are there new standards, or the old standard, or is it just there's just a bunch of new journalists, so-called journalists, who it doesn't matter to them anyway? I mean, Bimbo, how do we inculcate the values that we were educated with, or should we?
I think we should. Because in as much as people should have access to information, I think, you know, we also have to protect. I think we have to protect people's sensibilities. The fact that something has happened does not mean that all the gory details must be visible. I mean, why? Let us not forget that in as much as it is news and it is information, we are actually talking about human beings. And so it is just not right for the world to be witnessing, if you like, witnessing some of these, well, what we used to call, I don't know if that's what it's still called, NTBB, not to be broadcast. There are certain things that, you know, growing up, we were told, you don't broadcast, you know, this, that, or the other. And it's fine to be adventurous. It's fine to, you know, to want to make a name. But then I don't think that making a name as a broadcaster or as a journalist should be at the expense of the people who are actually suffering that particular situation. And I think that some of these events that are disturbing, if actually our journalists and reporters and correspondents are true storytellers, there is a way of telling that story that ensures that every aspect of it, the importance, the nitty-gritty is there but then you do not offend, you do not go beyond your bounds. I mean, there needs to be a line in the sand. So if people have decided to forget about the standards, if people have decided to become, 100% sensational, I think it's quite expensive. It's somebody's paying for it somewhere.
Yeah, you make a really good point, because like it or not, we've got billions of broadcasters now. We used to have, I was in charge of network standards. We used to have a standard, we used to have a broadcaster, but now ISIS, those guys can go on the internet and show awful images and frightening, soul-destroying images, and they can do it. And for example, the New Zealand mosque shooter, you remember this guy? He streamed live what he was doing in those mosques in New Zealand. So virtually anyone can use the medium, and that's where the I guess when we talk about civic and civil journalists, that's where it begins. Susan, got a thought? Oh, by the way, just quickly before you answer, I just want everybody to know who's watching, where we will be entertaining your questions. So please type your questions in, send them to us, and I'll be watching for them, and I'll put them to our panelists. Yes, Susan.
I wanted to add to Bimbo's comment there as well. So well spoken and well put. I think the major thing is, as journalists, we always have to allege. And to your point, Richard, and I don't think a lot of people who just throw stories up on socials, it could be out of context so easily. So many things could go wrong. And an editor, you always need an editor before it goes on. And talking about what you said, Richard, it's amazing. We interviewed the New York Times' Nicholas Kristof last week. And he exposed the company in Canada, in Montreal, called Pornhub. And they millions.
They were Canadian.
Yeah, millions. They were up before the ethics committee in Canada. Millions and millions and millions of pictures and videos were thankfully taken down. However, how is it when we have in this society, there's all kinds of sides on this, I understand. The president at the time of the quote unquote free world being taken off Twitter, private, multi-billion private company, and Parler and everything else taken off, whether you agree with it or not. But we need a New York Times reporter in the US to tell our Canadian government that there's images of women, girls, and children being raped, and to do something about it. But you can still see beheadings and whatnot on Facebook and every other. It's just to me, it's gobsmacking. It's so much irony wrapped into kind of like a indignant, it makes me really upset as I get older to see all this confusion and almost like an acceptance of it. And you can see what you said on the internet, Richard. You can literally shut down a president, right or wrong. I'm not right. No. Not here to argue. It's a principle. And then but they can't, major credit card companies and the government can't take down horrific child exploitation.
I guess that raises the question of free speech. The Americans have a notion of free speech from their First Amendment that is very broad. And I know growing up in Canada and being part of the Commonwealth, we have a different notion of free speech. There are certain things we say no. And when I used to be the network censor, somebody would out and out tell a lie. I'd call them on it, say, that's a lie, you can't say that. But so, I mean, where are we headed with that? Bimbo, do you have any thoughts about, free speech versus what a journalist does? I mean, are we limited? Should we be limiting ourselves?
Well, I think that there are places where the free speakers can go to and say whatever they like. But I don't think that people should be given the opportunity to foist their opinions, some of them very dangerous ones, on members of the public. This sense of responsibility that goes with speech. There's nothing that is free. Everything has some kind of cost attached to it, and I don't know. I feel uncomfortable imagining that people can just get up and say, whatever they like. It's just not. It's not right. It's usually at somebody else's expense. And when we're talking about journalism, there has to be a limit. There has to be a limitation. There has to be some caution attached to what people say, because the media is very, very powerful. That's the thing, you see, and it's not everybody that is watching or listening or reading, for that matter, that can cope with some of the things that are being said. We know that there are instances where people have been easily misled, and well, humanity is what it is. There will always be people who are very impressionable, just as there will always be people who are strong. So if I happen to be a strong person, and I have a particular opinion, goodly or badly, quote unquote, does that mean that I should be given the opportunity to say whatever I want to say, and lead people, literally up the garden path?
Raise a good question. Are there good opinions and bad opinions? Well, I'll throw this at you, Susan. I hear some opinions, and I know they're opinions, but they're backed by reasoned thought. There's some reasoning behind them. There's some thought. They may not be facts, but persons, I've seen this, I've seen that, so I'm concluding this. And it's not absolute fact. They've concluded it. But then other times you hear people, most racism and hatred, not most, all racism and hatred is based on a lack of logic. So, how do we distinguish, and how do we educate people to know the difference? Susan, you got some thoughts about that?
That's too deep for me. It's way too deep.
Well, okay, well,
it's Monday morning.
Let me put it in a newsroom for you then. I see that with increasing frequency, I have difficulty telling whether I'm reading a news report or an opinion piece. Yes. There appears to be a blurring of the lines. Talk to that.
Yes, absolutely. Writing in the first person was the most difficult thing I ever had to transfer to about, 3 years ago, because it's very, very difficult. Racism in news is, it's such a huge, huge issue. We have some people in Western Canada who live literally in all white towns, and they call Black people colored people. And they don't know that they've never been educated. So they'll comment on our Facebook, and I have to educate them in the kindest way I can that when we have a panel of Black men speaking about their mental health, that is part of the mosaic of our country and our world. And I don't even like saying they, but Black men have gone through, as have Black women, a lot through the social unrest, the anti-Black racism in the US. And still today in 2021, I'm raised in the first Trudeau's multicultural Canada in grade school in the 70s. But there's actually people who are not, who don't know that multiculturalism exists, and that on a show like ours, calling us out for Black men's panel on mental health. So I commented in the nicest way I could. So for me, that's racism. That's blatant racism by an ill-informed person in a very small town in the Rocky Mountains in Western Canada, not inner city Toronto or any inner city Montreal or any of our other major inner cities. Does that make sense?
Bimbo, you want to respond?
It is not only rampant and obvious, it's also kind of below the belt. It exists. We can't get away from it. I think about a couple of weeks ago or so, I saw something. I saw this clip. One of our celebrated authors was in Paris. When I say our celebrated, I mean a Nigerian author, Chimamanda. She was in Paris and she was being interviewed by a white female journalist. And the female journalist asked this question. She said, "Are there libraries in Nigeria?" Well, you can trust, you can trust our author, who is, very well known, and she goes around the world lecturing in universities and, stuff like that. She really gave it to her and made her understand that, that was not the kind of question that she expected any journalist to ask in the year of our Lord 2021. So I think Susan used a word which I think is very important, and that word is education. Honestly, sometimes I think some of the notions that are put across, some of the ideas that are put across, are really not necessarily based on racism per se, but on ignorance and lack of education. Because it's very easy to ask questions. We're talking about internet and social media. There's so much information out there. So if actually you have a genuine interest, you'll find out, and you won't end up by making a fool of yourself as a result of asking, silly questions. Because really, if you are a trained journalist, how can you imagine that you would ask such a question in a country where there are so many, universities and so many accomplished people, and you're asking, are there libraries in Nigeria? Well, I mean, in fact, some of the private libraries are probably much better stocked than some of the, the public libraries. But yes, let's try and educate ourselves. If the citizens, those who wish to be citizen journalists, if they don't want to do any better for themselves, well, perhaps we may not hold them responsible, but we certainly will hold trained journalists responsible for bias and partiality. We will.
Thank you both. I've got lots more to ask, but I'm going to go to Ola, because Ola, I think you were going to come at us with some of the questions that our viewers are asking, our participants are asking.
Yeah, well, none of them have asked questions, but I have a question of my own that I want to ask. I'm surprised though, because I know I have journalists who are on this call, and I was hoping they would ask questions for publications in Nigeria. So, I want to know what you veterans think. If some of my friends were asking, am I going to make presentations? I said, I don't have any presentation to make when people who have been in the industry for 30, 40 years are speaking. I just want to listen and learn. But when you see a post on social media, I want people to get a bit of a sense, a new sense. What do you think about? At my level, I'm thinking, what's the point of this post? Is someone paying for it? Something like that. But what do you see? When you see a post on social media, especially as regards, major issues, how do you decipher if it's another deceit or it's another fake one? What do you see? The second leg to that question is, if you want to make a post on social media, how do you craft it out? It's not like a regular newsroom, but what are your pointers? That's my question.
Susan, you want to respond?
I really try to, the spirit of my page on social media is just love and music. And the spirit on my Instagram is as well. I'm not interested in, I posted this, which is very rare. I'm not interested in social media, but I'm addicted to it and I can't help looking at it. But I really love sending out encouragement and reading it. So many times I've seen, it's almost like they're called the metrics, or what's the algorithms. They already know, like, don't bother sending that to Susan. She's not gonna click it. So I can't really answer that question. Honestly, I have seen lots of things that people used to send me that I've known right away are not right, or that they're, you know, just wrong. So I don't really pay attention to it. And I don't think I'm on a lot of algorithms. And I watched that Social Dilemma on Netflix, and the one guy at the end said, just don't clickbait. So I don't clickbait anything. And I confuse social media by saying I'm a young, like I'll click for young singles and stuff like that just to confuse them. Because I'm just not a social media person, but you're supposed to be as a journalist, and God knows we try so hard to get noticed, and there's some kind of mystery attached to it, and I don't know what it is. I'm sorry, Olaf. I don't think I answered your question very well.
But you raise a really good point, Susan, because I've often said, for all the years I made television and all the years I was hosting and producing television, I never got anybody convinced of anything. And then I hear people, they got radicalized on the internet. Like, how's that happen? Because I made television that was convincing and thoughtful all those years. I don't think I ever radicalized anybody.
Very good point.
Bimbo, you got any thoughts about this?
Well, I think many a time when I see things on social media, I must confess that there's a word that comes to my mind, rightly or wrongly, and that's mischief. Because sometimes you just wonder, you know, what's the motive behind some of these posts? But then when you say, okay, so if you want to put up a post and on social media, are there any kind of guidelines? I think probably the first thing that a citizen journalist should consider, if they want to be taken seriously, I think, you know, we've always been taught that there are some basic questions that have to be answered when you're writing a story, you know. So the 5, is it 5 now? Why, where, when, who, which, and how. Well, that's not a W, but you know what I mean. I think if we can try to ensure that those basic questions are answered, that at least will give us some kind of confidence that perhaps this person actually knows what he or she is talking about. It may not tell us the truth, because you can make up stories, you can make up information, but then if you are given that information, then there's something to investigate. So if you're really interested in that story or that information, then you can look it up and find out if really this is the truth. Something happened quite recently. You may be aware of the Chibok incident in northern Nigeria, in Borno. I think about 2014 it happened. 200, almost 300 secondary school girls were kidnapped and whisked away from their school in the night by Boko Haram insurgents. And from time to time, some of these girls are able to escape, or with some kind of negotiation, some of them are able to be reunited with their parents. About a week ago, there was a story on social media stating that 100 girls had been I can't remember now whether they said they were released or they escaped. But then also around about that same time, our service chiefs were replaced, and a particular online medium picked up this story and decided to interview the new chief of army staff. And he came out and said he's not aware of anything. He has no idea of whether any army officer had been able to facilitate the release of any of these girls. He was not aware of any parents that had given an indication that they had been reunited with their daughters. So, you know, what do we believe? We've kind of been boxed into a corner where each time we see something that leads on social media, not a story that emanates from any of the traditional media platforms, but each time something new, breaking news, as we call it, hits the social media platforms, we just have to be, you know, a little bit cautious. We have to wonder, is this really true? And why is this story being published? Who is going to benefit by the publication of this story? I mean, we have to become investigative journalists all over again on stories that are supposed to be giving us answers.
Yes.
We begin to ask questions.
Yes.
I made an observation some time ago that what happens with social media is facts are treated like opinion, and opinions are treated like they're facts. So the Flat Earth Society guys get a full hearing on social media. And I'm sorry, I don't believe there's a flat Earth, and I think there's very little, if any, evidence at all of that. We do have an actual question from one of our participants. What role does investigative journalism play in trying to solve some of the false news out there on social media? Bimbo, you've got your awards in investigative journalism. Perhaps you'd like to address that question. What role does investigative journalism play in trying to solve some of the false news that's out there?
Well, in fact, I've just given you a very good example. The particular medium that picked up this story and decided to investigate, they're actually very well known for their investigative pieces. So actually, we really do have to follow through. It's important. Maybe I don't know. You see, I consider the kind of information that we have to dig into, and the truth is that, you know, if you're going to investigate a story, you really have to you have to, apart from looking at it from all angles, you almost have to also analyze the issue. Because, and that's something that we did a lot of, you know, during my days as a news anchor. I think in that position, you are actually given the opportunity to do this analysis. Of course, you are not the analyzer, you are not the analyst, but then you're given the opportunity to ask the kind of questions that will give you the kind of answers that not just you require, but also people who are listening and watching, you know, also require. So maybe at the end of the day, we're all going to end up by being investigative journalists, because the information that we get has to be verified. We cannot just assume that what we receive is correct, and that is why I think civic journalism is more of a sure banker, if you like, because all those traditional steps have been taken, all the necessary questions have been asked. And well, what more do you want than to get a satisfactory result, a satisfactory answer? Because basically that's what journalists do. We ask questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Susan, got a comment on that?
Yeah, just exactly what Bimbo was saying. You get information sent to you all the time. I get information from like some pretty wild sources, as I'm sure Bimbo, Richard, Ola, you do. And you have to have the radar go off and make sure that what they're saying is true, because so often it suits their agenda and they think that they automatically assume your show is a certain way, so sure, you'll go for it. And yeah, so just really what Bimbo said, you gotta always investigate.
I couldn't, we're getting toward the end of our discussion, but I couldn't conclude without asking you if you can give me a State of the Union as to the status of women in news gathering and in journalism. Unfortunately, we still have to ask this question, but I'm asking that. And also, perhaps you might want to reflect on the fact that the United States now has a woman vice president. I'll start with you, Susan. What do women bring to the newsroom, and what will they bring to the administration of the United States, for example, in a senior post like that?
Well, I just like to say Tachi's question there for a global watchdog sure would be awesome. Tachi, if I'm saying your name right. And yeah, it's thrilling that Kamala Harris is there. It's thrilling that we had Michelle Obama. It's not thrilling in Canada that there is still a power gap that's actually illegal, but it still goes on, and that is equal pay for equal work. Mm. The Globe and Mail just did a long, I think it was over 3 years. And the gap between women, the power gap and women in power still bothers a lot of people. There's more.
As it should.
What?
I say as it should.
What do you mean? No, it bothers people that women are in power.
Oh.
Yeah.
I would say that people are bothered by the fact that women are not equal. I mean, yeah, well, as it should. But I hear what you're saying. Go on.
Yeah, you sound like my dad there for a minute. No, only kidding.
No.
So little comic relief. Love you, Dad. Yeah, so there's a real big power gap. And to see all these women come up it's fascinating and it's beautiful. And it's our sisterhood, and it's so important. And I've seen a change in my lifetime. So I'm pretty grateful for that and pretty glad about that. But I still think, Richard, yeah, and Bimbo, in our year of the Lord 2021, we got to be asking this question. Like, what?
I know.
So, but I'm encouraged, and State of the Union, I'm encouraged. It's getting more difficult. It's getting more exhausting. It's getting more overwhelming. Just keeping up with everything, but I'm encouraged.
Bimbo?
Yes, I agree with Susan. I'm encouraged too. We have in Nigeria, we have a lot of women who are very, very good journalists, producers, presenters, etc. But it is also a fact that we don't have enough women in decision-making positions. And actually, I was part of a project where we went to some news organizations asking that women be given an opportunity to rise. I don't think that it's a question of tokenism doesn't actually have much to do with it, because a lot of women are very, very competent. And in fact, I would go as far as to say some of our female journalists here are pretty daring, some of the investigative journalists, the kind of stories that they've come out with, sometimes, it gives you a bit of goose pimples that they would actually go that far, you know, to get good stories, to get at the truth. But I am really excited that we have a partly Asian, partly, I think her father is Jamaican, or was Jamaican. Yes. So we have a female as vice president for the first time in America. In fact, I was thinking about it, you know, last week that, you know, we had a situation where we had, you know, 3 Black women who had really made an amazing impact on the world, all within a few days. You know, we had a Black woman we had Cicely Tyson, who at 90, whatever, 96, 97, you know, had made such a huge impact on the entertainment scene, and even within, you know, civil rights moves. So I call her, or I address her as who was, okay? And then we have who is, which is Kamala Harris, who is now America's vice president. And then we have who is to come. And that's, I'm trying to remember her name now. Amanda, is that right? Amanda Warden. Yeah. Yes, the poet.
Yeah.
The poet laureate, yes. I mean, she's the shape. Yeah, she's the shape of things to come. Yeah. And it was really quite a landmark week, considering those 3 Black women on the global scene. Because, I mean, make no mistake about it, everybody all over the world heard about and knew about those 3 Black women. So the women are here, not that they're coming, they're here.
We ain't going away. We've got to wrap this up. So I'm going to ask each of you, we were asked a question toward the end. I'm going to ask each of you a brief response to this. So what do we do going forward? How do we raise the standard of journalism? How do we make sure, I mean, I'm asking to answer it briefly if it's possible. What do we do? Susan?
To raise the standard of journalism?
Well, they said, somebody said, do we need a global watchdog? You know, like.
That's a really good point, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Sorry, Susan, before you answer the question, if I may add, so that you can answer it together. I was chatting with Richard about the fact that, I don't know, I'm confused. What is the balance between opinion journalism and what we know about putting all the sides on the table for people to decide? I was listening to a presentation at TEDx, and that back in the days, journalism was not about helping people to decide what to think, but giving them the facts so that they can make a decision.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, Ola, you should write about that because you're a phenomenal writer. I just think that shortly, it's just getting more and more difficult in an age of confusion and the zeitgeist, or the spirit of the age. Just so much information coming at us from so many angles all the time. I think the thing for us to do as journalists and writers is to do that, but also to think of the person you disagree with most and try to understand their point of view, not in anger. These nurses I interviewed last week, they were fired in Canada for speaking out against the government about how the babies in the NICU were being treated, taken away from their mothers too soon. They just said what they thought. There was another guy, doctor William Osler. He criticized the government. He was fired. And I think what we need to do is not in anger, just look at the side of the story that angers us the most and then respond to it not in anger. These nurses weren't angry about being fired. They were just presenting their point of view, and it was refreshing. And I think too much opinion is said in anger, and it's done with a happy face, like, you know, on lots of, it's done like, oh, but then what you hear underneath is very critical and opinion. So that would be what I'm trying to figure out right now.
Bimbo, you want to wrap up your comments?
Yeah. I think the only space where opinion should be considered or accepted is if actually the program is styled, there is a program that is styled that way. And then of course, we know we have columnists, et cetera, so they are free to present their opinions. But if we're talking news generally, we are supposed to give out the information and let other people make up their own minds. Now, about 3 weeks ago or so, I attended a webinar, and the person who was lecturing, the lecturer, a Dr. Andrea Gromele, she's from the University of Governance in Berlin. I think it's specifically the Hertie School. She said something that struck me, and it may not be new, but it struck me anew. And what she said on that occasion was that the media does not tell you what to think. It tells you what to think about. Now, there's a clear dichotomy between the two.
Wow.
So if we tell you what to think, then we're giving you our opinion. That's not what we're supposed to do.
Right.
We're supposed to tell you what to think about. And I think that is I think is the way forward. And although I believe that citizen journalism has its place, I also think that there's got to be a compromise, a kind of middle of the road.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want to suggest as a way forward is what I call journalism of the people, for the people, by the people.
Mm.
And that's where I will rest my case.
Thank you very much. And just Ola, I'm going to ask you to wrap things up in just a second, but by way of agreeing with you, I can't help but noticing that in what we cover, we need to look at what it is we're covering, what we're putting on the agenda. So for example, there's big trouble in Tigray province in northern Ethiopia. You got to go digging to find anything about it here because it's not on the agenda here. So it's who sets the agenda, which is what you said at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Ola, please wrap up for us.
Well, we're running a little bit out of time, so I'm going to make it very brief. Just basically appreciation. Thank you, Bimbo Oloyede. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Richard. And for everyone that joined us, thank you so much. For me, I think it was a very beautiful and exciting conversation. I could go on and on because I was enjoying it. And I believe all of you guys also enjoyed it. And I believe for all those who joined us also, it was, I have my notes here. I was taking notes. And that's why I decided that this is not a forum where I want to say anything. I just want to catch all the moments. Thank you once again. I believe this is the beginning of many more conversations. And I look forward to talking again and again. So guys, I'm gonna knock on your door again and again.
You do that, Ola. I love you.
Yeah. All righty,
Thank you very
guys.
much. We've enjoyed the conversation too.
It was a pleasure working with everyone here, honestly.
You as well, Richard and Bimbo. So great.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
All righty. See you guys later.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
See you again.
Thanks to the people.
Bye.
who
Keep
are
up your good
watching.
work.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. You too. Susan, God bless.
God bless.